أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحن نصلي على رسوله الكريم والسلام عليكم to all my brothers and sisters. Jummah is a very, very appropriate time for one to speak and give a message, and that is what the Jummah khutbah is really all about. But being in an English-speaking community, we have our English talk before the actual Arabic khutbah, and it's an opportunity for us to make ourselves aware of what's happening around us and to take stock week by week of where we are, where we're supposed to be. And I've chosen today to speak of various things, but the title for it is, Are We Following the Example of the Holy Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam? It's a question format. I think we all know that he is our example. The Quran says so that Uswatun Hasana, he is the best example. So that's an established fact. But today we're asking ourselves, are we following that example? How are we looking at it? And in what perspective we are placing it? بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لقد كان لكم في رسول الله أسوة حسنة. So that's an established verse of the Quran, that in Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam we have the perfect example of the best human being that they ever can tread on in the universe, not just on earth. But then we start looking at what the implication of this example is really all about. What does it mean to us? It's just a statement that is the best example. Why is it put there? And we go back to the Quran and the sayings of the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he's one occasion said, "Taraktu fiikum amrayn." I have left two things with you people. And that, what are those two things? And if you follow these two, lan tadillu, you will not become ignorant, provided you hold on to it. And those two things are, firstly, the Quran, Kitabullah, and secondly, Uswati, my example, wa sunnati, my sunnah. Now this is not something very small or something just to say as something that is an entertainment. We have to be very serious to understand this. When Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is talking of Kitabullah, we go back to the Quran and we see what the Quran says about itself and its and the fact that it is the purest preserved scripture, the only purely preserved, pristine, in its pristine original pure form, and that is the Quran. That's the only one. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Inna nahnu nazzalna dhikra wa inna lahu lahafizun. Very, very important. It does not only say that we have revealed the Quran to you. That is okay. The Torah was revealed. Injil was revealed. The scriptures, certain scriptures were revealed to Ibrahim alayhi salam and Musa alayhi salam and the other prophets. But for the first time, a revelation, a book from Almighty Allah is saying that we are going to look after it. We are lahafizun, we will take care of it. So the responsibility to preserve the Quran is taken away from the Muslim community, and it becomes a prerogative of Almighty Allah Himself, that He has taken the responsibility to look after the Quran. So as Muslims, there can never be at any time a thought or an idea coming into our minds that the Quran is not preserved 100% in its original format. That thought is not acceptable in Muslim belief. It's not there. And it will be preserved. And the institution of preservation, this is not the occasion for it, but you can look at it. No other book is memorized in the way that the Quran is. And we have many institutions that give the opportunity to our children to by heart. And that's a very unique institution. Unique in the sense that only Almighty Allah could know in His wisdom that we will have a digital age where things can be preserved on chips and little gadgets. We didn't know that. And there may be still things to come that we are not aware of. Technology and science goes on. Allah's knowledge, in fact, it's not our knowledge. It's Allah's knowledge that He gave originally to the Spirit, to Adam alayhi salam, when He said, we've taught him the names. Now, the names is not people's names. It was names of the different disciplines and sciences and the different things that we're going to discover. So that was given in its entirety to the heart of Adam alayhi salam. So knowledge was given to mankind, and we will discover it as we go along until Yawm al-Qiyamah. There will be always discoveries, whether it's scientific, whether it's philosophical, whatever it might be. So that knowledge will open. In fact, the knowledge given to mankind by Almighty Allah is not even a drop of an ocean. And even the ocean is not a good enough example. The knowledge that we may think is vast, and all the wonderful discoveries where, wow, human beings are wonderful. They got the car and aeroplane and jets and rockets, and they're going to go to the moon and Mars. But if we know our Quran and we know our Sunnah, then that knowledge given to us and all the knowledge that's still coming for so many centuries is not even a drop in the ocean. And there are many other verses in the Quran that says, when it mentions about 7 oceans or oceans of ink and all the trees of the world becoming pens, and you won't even write a drop of knowledge, you won't be able to write down. So we must look at that perspective of what knowledge is. So the Quran is totally preserved. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the greatest creation, is telling us that you have to hold on to the Quran and follow it. It's not just a book to dust, put in a nice cloth. We have to do that out of respect. Put it on a high shelf. Yes, we have to do that out of respect. But it doesn't remain there. That book must be opened. That book must be understood. That book must be practiced. That is what Rasulullah is telling us, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And sunnati, the way he lived. He's telling us, you have to live the way I lived. Yes, with our abilities, we can never become to that level of piety and spirituality, but our attempt, our niyyah, our intention will always be there to become as close as possible to live a way of life that is in tune and as close as possible to the life that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam lived and asked us to live and demonstrated it to us how to live. And then we are also instructed that it is not just following the Sunnah, and it is not just following the Quran. There's an element of emotional attachment. There's an element of love that has to be created. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is on record in one of your hadiths where he said, the first thing that you have to teach the child, not what you and I think. I'm talking of practicing Muslim homes. And we should feel proud if the first word that a child mentions is Allah. We should feel extremely proud because that's what we like, our children must say. But what did Rasulullah tell us? He didn't tell us teach those words. He's created that ambiance and the culture that we should teach those words. We should automatically do it. But what he told us was, the first thing you need to teach your child is the love of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Ahl Bayt, the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his wives, his children, his son-in-law, and the Khulafai Rashidin, the people around him, that you have to learn to love. But here the reference Rasulullah, that the Quran is making, if you want to learn to love Almighty Allah, then what is the formula? Because in the end we make zikr, we make salah, we show our allegiance and the desire to worship to Almighty Allah. In other words, we want to have a love for Almighty Allah. But the key to that, the Quran tells us, قُلْ إِن كُنْتُمْ تُحِبُّونَ اللَّهَ فَاتَّبِعُونِي. Very clear recipe. You all know it. You've heard it in every Mawlud. That if you want to love Almighty Allah, fattabi'uni. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has emphasized this all the time. So you have to create that love of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now you cannot say, I love Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I'm wish through that door to love Almighty Allah and become as pious as possible. But you don't do anything that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did. Can you call that loving Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam when you don't follow his example? And then, as far as the Quran is concerned, it tells us, وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ. You know, this idea that has been perpetuated by some individuals and some people, and to be honest, even some of the ulama, that the Quran is very difficult to understand. There are several verses. I'm only quoting one here. يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ. We have made the Quran easy, not just to recite, not just to memorize, but also to understand. It's a message. How can a message be sent to us by Almighty Allah for all times and we can't understand that message? Your beloved sends you a letter, you'll go berserk. You'll run, if you don't understand the language, you'll run to every translator. Translate this, my girlfriend, my boyfriend, my loving wife has sent this letter to me. Please translate it to me. Do you have that approach to understand the Quran? That's what it should be. It's a message from whom? Not my beloved wife, not my beloved husband, not my father, not my mother. That letter already should excite us. This is a communication from Almighty Allah. And not just a communication, there's not just a postman bringing it to you. The greatest creation of Almighty Allah, the greatest Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is bringing it to you. See the Quran in that context. Now, won't you want to, shouldn't you make it compulsory on yourself to try and come as close to understand that Quran? It's your fard, it's your bounden duty. Yes, we accept that there are language problems and everybody are not Arabs. All that accepted, but not an excuse. We can still understand the Quran because the Quran is made easy. If we take the first step towards understanding the Quran, I can assure you, you will find a way and it will open up for you. But you need to take the first step to understand the Quran. So the two things that we are asked to follow by Rasulullah, Amrain, two aspects, the Quran and the Sunnah, it's available to us. You know, when it comes to the Sunnah of Prophet ﷺ, it's become like a second nature because we don't understand these things. Is it an authentic hadith? Isn't it it's a fabricated hadith? Yes, that science exists. But that exists since 1500 years ago. In the first 300 years, great scholars like Imam Bukhari, Imam Muslim, Imam Tirmizi, all of them went through those hadiths. All those hadiths were written in the first century. It was available in writing. It's not something we discovered today. It was there. And these scholars went through every hadith. And even Imam Bukhari, which is the most authentic book, says his view, expresses on every hadith. How authentic this one is, how weak that. The science is complete. It is done. So after 1500 years, we can't come up suddenly and say, we did that for 1500 years, but we found out now that it's not an authentic hadith. Come, brothers. Allah can't set a defective message to us. He can't send something that has a flaw. We must be very careful. It cannot have a flaw. We accept this weak hadiths. We do that. How many a time we hear a story, and when it ends up, a man that is sick is probably dead. But we give mixed messages. That's human nature. In the case of hadiths, it's checked, it's authenticated. There are weak hadiths, there are fabricated hadiths, but you're not going to reject 99% of hadiths just because of one or two weak. It's a science that the Muslims perfected and dealt with, and that literature is available in writing. Every hadith that you find, you'll find the note next to it, Hasan, Sahih. The comments are there. So don't get into that, oh, it's difficult to follow the Sunnah, we don't know this. There's no such thing. We cannot be asked by the Quran, by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to do something and it's defective. Our thinking is defective. Islam is not defective. So we must be very careful. And then the Quran also says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Udkhulu fi silmi kafa. And there are more than this verse. There are several verses that says, in order to be a Muslim, in order to perfect your iman, you have to accept Islam in its totality. There are other verses, time doesn't allow, where it says in reference to Jews and Christians, they followed بِبَعْضِ kitab, some sections of the book. Now, if we decide not to follow everything of the Quran, or in our thinking have this idea, it's not practical, it's very difficult, then we're doing exactly what the Jews and the Christians have done. We want to choose what we want to follow. That's not allowed. Udkhulu fi silmi kafa, enter Islam completely. Yes, then we will realize when you read that kalima and you tell your children, when you teach them, that this means that I believe in one Allah. Explain to those children what one means. There is no room for shirk. Embedded in their thinking what shirk is. Explain it to them. La ilaha illallah is got no value if the child doesn't understand. There is one Allah. What does it mean? That must be explained. And the reason why we have come to this kind of situation, if you look at the Quran, there's a general view that there are 6,666 verses in the Quran, but it's probably 632 or 38. That's not the issue how many verses there are. Some include Bismillah, some exclude it. So in that context, but there are over 6,000 verses in the Quran. Do you know what the entire fiqh literature consists of, linking it to the verses of the Quran? Now I want you to listen very carefully here. I'm not saying something that you don't know, you know it, but I'm putting it in a certain context. Do you know that the entire knowledge of fiqh, which is compulsory, it's essential, because without that we cannot be Muslims, which refers to the kalima, which refers to salah, which refers to saum, which refers to zakah, which refers to hajj, and the format of the Jummah salah and the format of the 5 salahs, all that. Verses relating to all these things are only about 533 out of 6,000 plus. In percentage, all that knowledge is 9% of the Quran. What is the 91% about? What is the message in this Quran that is 91%? We are so hooked onto fiqh, and we have to be, that's essential. We can only make salah in a certain way. So that's, the 9% is absolute essential. But we have reached a stage, and that's why I posed that question in the title, are we following Rasulullah? Are we committed to following 9%, and we're not realizing that 90%, not being ignored, but we're not taking it seriously? Now, you need a lot of time to deal with 90%. The 9% is easy. Our pillars and what goes around it, all the essentials, those things we have to do. That's when we are observed, then it is to do with our salah, it's to do with our tawheed, it's to do with our saum, our hajj, zakah, and the love of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But when it goes beyond that, what is that message in the Quran? It is about the way we behave. It is about what is in our soul, in our heart. So if we're going to follow 9%, we'll always have problems. We have to follow that 9% as well as the 91%. So what would that 91% represent to a non-Muslim? That is what the non-Muslim wants to see. You can't present your salah and saum to a non-Muslim. You can tell them, What does he want to see? What does a fellow Muslim want to see? He wants to see how you behave, how you handle your anger, how you are with your wife or your husband, how you are with your children. Those are the aspects. How do you handle? In which way are you concerned about other human beings? Have you ever cried for a human being, a strange human walking there, a young boy of 18, 19 who's become a drug addict? What's your response in your heart to that? If your iman is right, and if you understand the 90%, you will immediately be either shed a tear or feel so sad that here is a human being created by Allah who is not following the Quran and Sunnah. He is not even a Muslim. You must be concerned. You can't walk past him, hey, he's a druggie, I'm not worried about him. Never. He is your responsibility, even if he's a total stranger. The Quran refers to the pain that Rasulullah used to feel for people who are not becoming Muslim and not behaving well. There are 128 verses that refers to the pain of Rasulullah. لَأَلَّكَ بَاخِئٌ is mentioned several times in the Quran. The pain, the sadness, the hurt of Rasulullah, his concern. Was he concerned to make money? Was he concerned to have a comfortable house? Nothing wrong. But what was his concern? And what was his concern when he gave his final khutbahs in the final Hajj? What was he concerned? Did he speak of high philosophy? What was he telling us? Look after your woman. Look after human beings. When he said, you go and take the message across, what was he saying? He wasn't saying, hold the Quran like people hold the Bible and shout, this is the book of Allah. To a non-Muslim, it doesn't mean much because he doesn't know the book of Allah. That taking that message, and 124,000 companions left Makkah and Medina after the demise. Why did they leave? Because they understood that message. And they went all over the world. In fact, on record, probably the first companions bypassed Afghanistan, India, and went straight to China. So the Muslims of China were the first Muslims outside the Arab world. There were others that came, like Salman Farsi, radiallahu anhu, and those that came. But as a mission, it was first to China. And today, Muslims in China are being slaughtered. So we need to be very, very careful. And we need to keep thinking, are we following 91% or just 9? We have to follow 100%. That's the requirement. And the mechanism is given to us. Our niyyah, when we accept Islam, when we read the kalima, is that I am a Muslim, I am Ahmad, I am Maryam, I want to follow the Quran 100%. But the Quran itself teaches us, the Sunnah itself teaches us, you are a human being. You are liable to make mistakes. You will make errors. And then it's given us the whole institution of Tawbah. What a gift. And there are these that say that probably on the day of judgment, the extremely pious person will almost want to wish that I made a few sins and made Tawbah, because the value of Tawbah is so wonderful. So he's given us the way. I mean, we are told 99 murders you can commit, and if you make Tawbah, you'll be forgiven. Not like the one alim that told the person, go and you will never be forgiven, so you kill the 100th one. And then somewhere told him, no, that person advised you wrong. You can seek Tawbah. After the 100th one, he realized that, he sought Tawbah, he went, and the message that he got was, leave this village, go to that village. And we know that story, you may have heard it many times. And he left to leave the area where he was committing all these crimes and go, and on the way he died. Now the question was, did he get forgiven? And Almighty is in charge of everything, 100%. But the angel said, now, what do we do? Do we take him to Jannah, or is he going to be condemned to the fire? And Almighty Allah told him, measure the distance. So in reality, the distance to the other village was less. But Almighty Allah, the words used, folded the earth and made the distance to the village he was going to the shorter distance, and he was forgiven. So Almighty steps in if your intention is pure. So the avenue of Tawbah is such a huge gift. Use it and make that niyyah that we want to follow the Quran 100%. We want to follow the Sunnah 101%. There's no room for half-heartedness. That is what destroyed the Ummah. And with this whole issue of Rohingya, take a lesson from that. It's a very, very sad situation. It's a heart-rending situation. But do you know that in 1961, a very pious alim gave a speech in Rangoon, and the speech is available. If you Google the Rangoon speech, you'll find it very easily. And he told them in 1961, the Muslims are very, very comfortable in Burma, very, very wealthy, and doing well. And he told them, the only thing that you people are not doing is spreading the word of Islam to the Buddhists. Be ready that the Buddhists will be ruling this country. 50 years down the line, it has happened. And they are being slaughtered. They were warned 57 years ago of this. They didn't take heed. We cannot be half-hearted in our Islam. We have to follow the Quran 100%. We have to follow the Sunnah 100%. We have to realize that the Quran is not a 9% message. It's a 100% message. So brothers, we need to make dua for each other. We need to pray for each other that we always will be on the right side. Almighty's message is not to exclude us, but to find every possible reason to give us forgiveness and let us go into Jannah. So at all times, make dua for each other, and inshallah, we will succeed. Islam is going to succeed. All we have to decide, which side do we want to be? We want to be nearer the village that will save us, or don't we want to be? It's our choice in the end. Nothing is being imposed on us. Jazakumullah, and thank you for the opportunity to the committee.